guys, welcome back to Unmedicated and Dysfunctional. I'm Kenz. Today I thought we'd go ahead and talk about fibromyalgia because there have been quite a few questions on what it is, what causes it, how do you get treatment for it, how do you get tested for it, just a lot of different questions that I've had since coming out about it. Now I've only dealt with it for a few weeks, which means my research knowingly dealt with it for a few weeks, which means my research is very limited. I am in no means an expert or a doctor. I'm not going to diagnose anyone with it. I really just don't know a whole lot about it. And truth is, in general, we just don't know a whole lot about it anyways. So basically, the way that I best understand what it is that it's a disorder that causes your nervous system to feel pain different than it should. Meaning in some areas it might be intensified, it might be larger areas than what it actually is, it might feel less than what it actually is. Along with that, you tend to have a poor memory, it comes with anxiety and depression, your skin can be really sensitive. There's a lot of different things that kind of come along with it that you wouldn't know if you didn't know to look for them, which is really interesting. I can tell you for me, it tends to mostly affect my abdominal area, so the front of my chest, my back, behind my lungs, my ribs get really sore, my uteral area. I've actually a few times been to the hospital because they thought I had appendicitis when I actually had a cyst in my ovaries. So there's a lot of things where the pain doesn't feel like it's in the right area, or it is in the right area and it's much more intensified than it should be. And my knees and also the joints in my hand. So it's kind of a very widespread thing that only affects 2 to 4% of people. More often it's women than it is men, which I don't know why that is. We always get like the worst stuff and we have to do childbirth. I don't know what that's about. The way that you get tested for fibromyalgia is actually really interesting. I ended up going to a specialist called a rheumatologist, and that's someone who looks for immunal disorders because I was sick very often and for longer than I should have been for what I had. So if I had a cold, I would be sick for a few weeks instead of a few days, which was kind of interesting for me. I think that stuff's kind of interesting, but also not super great if you want to feel good and you want to be active and you want to go out and do things. So what they do is they basically look over your history. And the fibromyalgia diagnosis is kind of like the last diagnosis that you give if nothing else shows up. So basically, all of my blood work and everything looked pretty okay. I didn't have any issues with my thyroid. It didn't look like my white blood cells were too spiked. None of that looked super abnormal. So what they do after that is something called a pressure point test. And what that is you've got 12 different areas, 6 pairs essentially. And if those areas are more tender than they should be, like if it hurts when you get jabbed there by someone's finger, which I felt like they were poking pretty hard, but maybe it might just be me. Basically, if a certain amount of those areas hurt when you get poked there, then you probably have fibromyalgia. And what they think causes this is in your pain receptors, you've got 2 different chemicals going. You've got a buffer, which is serotonin, and you've got the actual pain feeling chemical, which I don't remember the name of, but we're going to call that the pain chemical. We'll call it Mr. P. And Mr. P. And if your body produces too much Mr. P or not enough serotonin, then it's very likely that you'll feel pain much worse than it actually is, because that's what your body's telling you to feel. So the way that my doctor described it was that when you have fibromyalgia, you tend to be sick more often and for longer because instead of focusing on being healthy and getting rid of what's causing you to feel sick, your body focuses on the pain management, which makes a lot of sense. And it also makes sense that this would tend to run with anxiety and depression because serotonin is that chemical that tells you whether or not you're happy. So if you're not making enough of that, then obviously you're going to be much lower than where the normal population is because your body's just not getting enough. So what they do to treat fibromyalgia most often tends to be antidepressants, because I really did not want to get back onto an SSRI. That was not something that I was jumping the gun to do, right? Obviously, that's why we're here. I wouldn't take away any of those experiences, but I don't want to go through them again. It was awful, and never again. Not saying that they're not good for some people, because some people they are fantastic for, just not for me. So what they put me on is actually a muscle relaxant that I take every night before I go to bed. And the idea is that you sleep better and longer in a deeper sleep. So your body creates more of that serotonin, and your muscles they don't really have any other choice but to be relaxed. So it's not constantly tight around those areas that are hurting. So the idea is that you're so relaxed and you wake up like a limp noodle and it's fantastic and you feel good, that over the period of the day, your body doesn't tighten enough to put strain on those parts of the body that tend to hurt the most. Now, some days are worse than others. I can tell you for a fact today and yesterday was pretty rough for me. My back, my ribs started to swell up, my back was pretty sore, and I ended up working and then just trying to sleep the rest of it off because I didn't want to take any painkillers. The idea is to get off of those painkillers for rib swelling and not having to take them as often, which is great because this has been fantastic for me. Over the few weeks that I've been taking it, I haven't been sick as often at all. I haven't been sick at all, which has been fantastic, especially in the heat. Normally, I tend to get in this heat just because it's the sun and it's hot and it's summer. I'm sure you guys tend to feel that sometimes too. So it's been really fantastic and it's really worked a lot for me. I really enjoy it. If you have fibromyalgia, it'd be awesome. I would love to hear your experiences about it. We can be fibro buddies. But it isn't something that is ever curable. So it's awesome that now we know what's going on, but at the same time, it's like, well, now I'm back on pills forever, so we might have to change the channel to medicated and dysfunctional. I'm not looking forward to the switch, but it might happen. I'm just kidding. We're going to stay unmedicated. But yeah, so that's kind of the basics of what fibromyalgia is, kind of how you treat the symptoms of it, even though you can't actually ever really treat the root cause of it because it is a chemical imbalance in your body. We think. We really don't know 100% for sure what it is, why it happens. It does tend to run in families, although it's not necessarily genetic. There's no gene that actually says, hey, you've got fibromyalgia. That's not a thing that's there. So it's very kind of an interesting field of study because there is so much that we still don't know about it. But at the same time, if you have it, it's kind of one of those experimental things. You kind of have to study yourself and go, okay, well, what can I take that's going to make today a little bit easier so that I can get through the day without being in constant pain? So it's kind of like being a little fragile egg all the time. You're like a little eggy, and people are a little bit afraid to touch you because they're worried that they're going to break you. But while we're fragile, we're not that fragile. You can still give me a hug. I appreciate it. And I hope I answered all of your questions. If I didn't, feel free to comment below, and we'll get to those questions probably just in the comments, and you guys can have a discussion about it. I'll pitch in what I know, but that's essentially the extent of what I know. So thank you guys so much for joining me. Thanks for hitting that subscribe button, checking out my Patreon. I love you guys so much. As always, I will see you in the next one. Bye!